many brothers and sisters have set off in the past weeks and the past month or so to carry out the blessed pilgrimage, the blessed act of Hajj. Others will set off in the coming days, and as the blessed days of Hajj, the days when the actual rituals will be carried out, approach us, it is appropriate to talk about Hajj and mention a few points in relation to Hajj. Now, not all of us will be going for Hajj this year. May Allah bless those that have not been for Hajj to carry out this blessed act. And even those that have been, may they go time and time again. So it is not appropriate to go into detail in relation to the rulings, how to perform, how to carry out. And many of those that are preparing to go have already prepared by attending lectures and attending different courses. But today I wanted to highlight one issue specifically, and that is the issue of performing Hajj and carrying out the act of Hajj. Allah mentions in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, that it is for Allah, it is a right for Allah. So this is a right, the performing of Hajj is a right that we owe to Allah. It's upon people, it is something that is compulsory upon people. And upon whom is it compulsory? Upon those that have the ability, that have the capability to go for Hajj, to come back. They have the necessary expenses. They've got the expenses for the dependents that they leave behind as well, if there's dependents behind as well. And they are also healthy, they sound, etc. So Hajj is an obligation upon the Muslims, upon those that fulfill the necessary criteria, the necessary conditions. They have to go. Sadly, we've got individuals, there's brothers and sisters, upon whom Hajj is fard, but they are delaying Hajj. They are not carrying out this blessed act of Hajj. And delaying it without a valid Sharia excuse renders one sinful. Delaying it without a valid Sharia excuse renders one sinful. If Hajj is compulsory, then one has to go out of his way. If Hajj is compulsory upon a person, then one has to go out of his way to try to carry out this obligation in the days of Hajj, at the time of Hajj. Sadly, we've got brothers and sisters that Hajj is compulsory upon them, Hajj is fard upon them. Year in, year out, they'll be going on holiday to different locations. They will be visiting their ancestral lands. But when it comes to Hajj, they will not be carrying out this duty of Hajj, despite it being fard. And there's many excuses made by such individuals that do not carry out this blessed act, despite it being fard. One excuse that is common is that I am not ready, I am not pious. I am not ready, I am not pious. Despite having the money, despite having the expenses, despite it being fard, the excuse, one common excuse is, I am not pious enough to go, and I am not ready to go. Now, before moving on, addressing this excuse, let's look at what the prophetic narrations mention. The Prophet ﷺ states that بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ, that Islam has been built on 5 pillars. Testifying that there is no God but Allah, and that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is Allah's messenger. So this is one of the 5 pillars, and this is the central pillar of Islam. And then the Prophet ﷺ further mentions the other 4 pillars of Islam, which are performing our 5-time daily prayers. That's another pillar. Paying zakat on an annual basis according to the lunar calendar. So yearly, once a person has to pay zakat, if zakat is compulsory upon a person. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentions performing Hajj. Another fundamental pillar of Islam is performing Hajj. And lastly, fasting in Ramadan. So this hadith that Islam is built on 5 pillars is a very important hadith in the life of a Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ, he draws an analogy here with a building or a structure of a building. That just like a building the structure of a building, if it has 5 pillars, 1 central pillar and 4 pillars around the building, and if one of the pillars are absent from that building, one of those 5 pillars, so 1 central and 4 pillars outside the central, if one of the pillars are absent, non-existent, or are shaken, then the whole building will be prone to collapse. There's a strong chance that the building will collapse. Likewise, these 5 pillars in the life of a Muslim are so central, both on a macro level and a micro level, that if they are non-existent, if they are not present, then it will shake the iman, the faith of a believer. The faith of a believer will be prone to be weakened. And if we are overlooking one of these 5 pillars, and our faith is weak, our iman is weak, then we need to address the pillars that we are not carrying out. So for example, the most carried out worship in the life of a Muslim is the 5-time daily prayers. If we are weak in our faith, then maybe the reason is that we are overlooking this fundamental prayer in our life, this fundamental pillar in our life. Maybe this is the reason that our faith is weak. Maybe this is the reason our iman is being shaken, because we are not adopting this pillar in our life. Likewise, the case with Hajj. Upon those individuals that Hajj is fard and they are not carrying out this pillar and their faith is weak, maybe this is the reason that they are delaying performing Hajj. And for this reason, their iman is in threat. And this is not a light statement. And going back to the excuse now, that I am not ready to carry out Hajj, I am not pious enough. The question to such an individual that gives such an excuse is, are you believing that you have a whole lifetime to become pious? As a Muslim, the next second is the second where you take action. As a Muslim, you are supposed to be taking action straight away. If you are not pious, then you become pious the next minute. How? By acting upon the commands of Allah, by staying away from His prohibitions. Allah the Almighty, He mentions time and time again in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. He mentions that those that believe, and with this He also mentions the words action, doing good actions. So Allah the Almighty, He doesn't just mention in the Quran that those that believe and leaves it there and then mentions that they will go to paradise, they will have infinite gardens, etc., etc. in the hereafter. Allah mentions those that believe and also do good actions and do righteous actions. So with iman comes action. And as a Muslim, you take action straight away. You can't think that you have a whole lifetime ahead of you. Why? Because death is unpredictable. Death has no age attached to it. Your next second is not guaranteed. Your next day is not guaranteed. So why have you got this sense in your brain, or why do you have this perception that you think that you have a whole life ahead of you and you will carry out Hajj the next year or in the coming years? What if you pass away? Then you have passed away without carrying out a duty that you owe to Allah, due to which you are sinful because it was compulsory upon you. Likewise, the other fundamental pillars of Islam. And remember, as a Muslim, time is of essence. It's all about time. When you take action, one takes action when he understands the importance of time. And time, it holds essence in the life of a Muslim. A Muslim doesn't waste time in taking action. Once he is told by Allah in the Quran that he has to do a certain action, he has to be punctual with his 5-time daily prayers, he has to carry out the duty of Hajj, then he needs to take action straight away. And that is why Allah the Almighty, He dedicates a whole surah to time. And what does He mention? He mentions, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. And by time, Allah takes an oath on time. And when Allah takes an oath on anything in the Quran, it indicates to the significance of that thing. So when Allah is taking an oath on time, He is telling us time is of essence. Do not waste your time. When I tell you to take action, then you have to take action straight away. And then Allah further mentions that verily man is in loss. Verily mankind is in loss, except for those that believe. Except for those that believe. And then he mentions except for those that do good action. So it's not just about believing, being a Muslim, being a mu'min, being a believer, but it's also about taking action. So those that believe and take action, do good deeds, do righteous deeds, then these are the individuals that are not in loss. These are the individuals that will feel true happiness and true success in their lives, in this world and in the hereafter. And then Allah further mentions in this surah, and those individuals that encourage and advise each other towards the truth and encourage and advise each other towards patience, these individuals are not in loss. And it has been attributed to Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, that if Allah the Almighty only revealed this verse or these verses, this chapter of the Quran, then it would have been sufficient for the guidance of all of humanity. This is how significant this chapter, the chapter of time, is in the Quran. It holds a lot of essence and it's all about time. And remember, I was mentioning that the next time, the next second, the next minute of a believer is not guaranteed. Death is unpredictable. We've got many examples in life. One brother that I knew last year, sadly, he was 50 plus, he passed away. He never used to be punctual with his 5-time daily prayers. He never carried out Hajj, despite Hajj being fard. And I used to try my best to encourage him, to advise him to perform salah. But what would he say? He would say, just make dua for me. I will start performing, later on, make dua for me that I become pious. Other brothers also tried to advise him, encourage him, but he wouldn't come. And all he would say is that, I've got a whole life ahead of me. Just make dua, I become pious. Make dua, I start becoming punctual, etc., etc. And sadly, we hear the news that 12 o'clock, midnight, he collapses outside just after leaving his car on the streets. Someone finds him, phones the ambulance, and this is how he passes away. May Allah forgive him, may Allah raise his ranks. But these are living experiences. These are experiences that are in front of us of individuals that procrastinated. They had this perception that they have a whole life ahead of us. And it's not just old people, even youngsters as well. I know many youngsters that were not pious, that were not punctual with their 5-time daily prayers, never used to carry out the commands of Allah, never used to stay away from the prohibitions, used to be indulged in music, in alcohol, in drugs. They were advised time and time again, but sadly you hear the stories that they pass away in a car crash. They drive luxury cars and there's nothing wrong with it, but this is all they believe, and they lose this connection with Allah, and sadly they pass away in car crashes, etc., etc. So these are examples for us to take heed that we do not have a whole life ahead of us. Life is not guaranteed for so many years. Don't think that you're going to live until 50, 60, 70, 80. The Prophet ﷺ does mention, it comes in a narration, that أَعْمَارُ أُمَّتِي مَا بَيْنَ سِتِّينَ وَسَبْعِينَ, that the average age limit of my nation is between 60 and 70. And we see this is the average age limit. Very few will surpass this age limit. But despite this, life is not guaranteed to 60, 70. We may just pass away tomorrow. So we need to take heed. We need to take action. We cannot think that we have a whole life ahead of us. When we make excuses such as, I am not pious, I will start becoming more pious when I get old, I will start becoming punctual with my 5-time daily prayers when I get old, it indicates that we do not understand the importance of time in our lives and in the life of a Muslim. It is important that we understand the importance of time, the importance of taking action, and I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to carry out this blessed act of Hajj if it is compulsory upon us and we have not carried it out. I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to understand the importance of time and the importance of taking action in relation to righteous deeds and good deeds. I pray Allah the Almighty give us the ability to act upon everything that has been said. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.